In an early interview, the author of Chainsaw Man, Tatsuki Fujimoto, described his inspiration for writing his characters. This was the interview where he mentions that Power was inspired by Eric Cartman from South Park, which is a well-known and extremely obvious fact if you consider her personality. A lesser-known part of this interview, and one that I want to focus on today, was that Denji and Pochita's relationship was meant to capture the dynamic of Finn and Jake from Adventure Time. This makes a lot of sense when you take into consideration that both series are about a young boy without parents growing up in a dangerous world accompanied by his dog with magic powers. And that young boy is infatuated with a dangerous woman who is obsessed with control. I am far from the first person to make this connection, especially since the interview took place years ago. But what I want to do in this video is dive into just how similar these two stories actually are and try to see what other aspects of Adventure Time may have inspired the events and characters of Chainsaw Man. And so, without further ado, come along with me and the butterflies and bees and chainsaws as we look into the parallels between Adventure Time and Chainsaw Man. To start off, let's look at the human protagonists from each series, Denji and Finn. Let's start with the original character, Finn the human. Finn was born in a colony of humans and eventually got separated from his parents and adopted by two anthropomorphic talking dogs named Joshua and Margaret in the land of Oo. He was raised by the canine couple alongside their son, Jake. Finn and Jake eventually became close brothers and remained together even after Jake's parents passed away. Throughout the story, Finn and Jake are inseparable. They spend their days going through dungeons, fighting monsters, getting loot, and just chilling in their treehouse. Even though they make plenty of friends along the way, Finn and Jake always stayed with each other because whenever they're together, it's always adventure time. Finn's anime counterpart Denji grew up without parents and was completely alone until he ran into Pochita, his loyal chainsaw dog and best friend. Denji was in debt to the Yakuza due to his father passing away and transferring all of said debt to him, a child. And since then, Denji was forced to hunt monsters called devils with Pochita, using the little dog's chainsaw powers to fight these devils and earn whatever money he can to survive. The bond between these two went from inseparable to inseparable, as Pochita literally fuses with Denji's heart and now aims to help him make all of his dreams come true. Pochita's powers allow Denji to turn into a hybrid between a human and the Chainsaw Devil, thus creating the show's titular protagonist, Chainsaw Man. Already, we see the core similarities between these two characters. They are primarily orphan children accompanied by their best friend who happens to be a magically powered talking dog. The two of them brave a dangerous and terrifying world, and both duos share an unbreakable bond with each other. Going beyond just this surface level connection, we can unravel some other layers of similarities between the two young heroes, Denji and Finn. These two young boys start off in a fairly similar circumstance. They're both reckless children with very little understanding of the world and act on their own basic desires and urges. These basic impulses often lead them to rush headfirst into any danger without much regard for their own safety or the safety of others. The reckless abandon that Finn has for all of his adventures would often come at a cost, and he is forced time and time again to engage in something that he has never had any experience with in his short life: self-reflection. The young human's growth is shadowed in tragedy, manipulation, love, loss, and friendship. And by the end of it, Finn constantly self-reflects on what he wants out of life and the people around him. His desires mature into more than just saving everybody, killing monsters, and finding treasure. Finn becomes a more whole human being by the end of Adventure Time. Denji works in very much the same way, albeit in a less kid-friendly way. Before joining with Pochita and turning into Chainsaw Man, Denji's life was simply a repeated cycle of killing devils for the Yakuza, eating whatever garbage he can find, and dreaming of a better life for himself. A life where he gets to have a girlfriend, and gets to play video games, and gets to eat bread with jam. After turning into Chainsaw Man and getting a new master in the form of a red-headed dominatrix, Denji gets to live a life beyond his wildest dreams. With a place to live, a bathroom to bathe in, and most importantly, he finally got his bread with jam. Much like Finn, Denji begins to self-reflect on what he truly wants out of life. He begins to ponder about how he wants to improve upon this new life that's already a step above the 16 years of misery he's experienced. This leads him to jump onto another goal driven by a basic desire: touching breasts. Over the course of Chainsaw Man, Denji's desires and goals grow as he continues to introspect on what he wants out of life. While Denji at the current point in the story still isn't truly whole yet, he is far from the immature and primal boy that only wanted to eat bread with jam and touch some boobs. A major part of the development of both characters are their relationships with the women in their lives. In particular, the primary loves of Denji's and Finn's lives, Makima and Princess Bubblegum respectively. After learning about Tatsuki Fujimoto's appreciation of Adventure Time, one of the storyboard artists and animators on Cartoon Network, Ian Jones-Cordy, drew one of my favorite pieces of fan art depicting Bubblegum as Makima. And once you begin to think about the actions of both characters, it all clicks in place why this piece of art is so poignant. These two women are the epitome of gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss. It is incredibly hard to talk about the actions of these two ladies without going into spoilers for both Adventure Time and the Chainsaw Man manga. So I'll go ahead and put a timestamp on the screen that you can skip to in order to avoid these spoilers. For those of you unfamiliar with the concept, operant conditioning is a psychological procedure in which consequences are paired with a behavior to reinforce behavior change. This method often uses rewards or punishments to either increase or decrease a behavior in somebody. You've most likely heard of the term positive reinforcement before, which stems from one of the 4 behavioral reinforcement methods. Positive reinforcement uses rewards such as food or money to reinforce or increase the likelihood of a behavior being repeated. For example, a boss might reward good performance at work with raises and promotions, or a child might be given an allowance for doing chores, thus increasing positive associations and maintaining the behavior. Operant conditioning through the use of positive reinforcement on its own isn't necessarily a malicious act. However, one avenue through which positive reinforcement is commonly used, and this is something closer to how Makima and Princess Bubblegum use it, is in training animals, particularly dogs. It's no secret that Makima's control complex turns her relationship with Denji into that of a master and her dog. During their first meeting, Makima gives Denji a choice between getting executed by her or becoming her pet. And in the very next episode and chapter, she feeds him and he barks for her, thus beginning the degeneracy that is the Chainsaw Man fandom. Tie this to the fact that her power manifests through the use of chains that control people's actions and the fact that she owns several dogs, it's blatantly obvious that Makima treats Denji like her own dog. She gives him treats like letting him fondle her breasts or go on a date with him as a reward for being a good boy. She employs this technique to keep him as a well-trained pet, just like she said she would during their first encounter. Denji succumbs so deeply to her control that when he loses Aki and starts to feel numb, he seeks her out to make his decisions for him because thinking and living his life were too painful. In the same way that Makima uses positive reinforcement to train Denji, Princess Bubblegum uses positive reinforcement to train Finn. She uses his crush on her and his heroic desires to establish a controlling relationship. Finn is Bubblegum's personal knight, a servant that is ready to fight on her behalf and be at her beck and call to carry out her wishes no matter how dangerous they might be. Finn and Denji's growth are both intertwined with their respective manipulators. It is extremely clear that Makima's treatment of Denji is nothing short of a word that starts with G and ends with rooming. It is also not a stretch when you examine Bubblegum's actions to say that the Pink Princess did the same thing with Finn. Princess Bonnibel Bubblegum is a character defined by her obsession with controlling everything in her life. She does everything with the perspective that she alone knows what's best for everybody and that if everyone would just listen to her, the world would be a better place. Because she believes that she's the hero of her own story, many of Bubblegum's actions can range from morally dubious to objectively evil. In much the same way, Makima's character is defined by control. Being the literal devil embodiment of humanity's fear of losing their own autonomy, Makima's entire being is the textbook definition of dominance and manipulation. Her power makes it so that anybody she deems lesser than her can fall under her control and do her bidding. She sees everybody as a means to an end to create her perfect world. A world, she says, that has no suffering, no hardship, and no bad movies. And in order to create this perfect utopia, she, much like Princess Bubblegum, will manipulate, lie, kill, and control anybody to get there. Even an impressionable teenager with no parents who is just discovering himself. Makima dangles this metaphorical carrot in Denji's face, making promises of giving sexual favors in exchange for doing what she wants. Again, more positive reinforcement. In doing so, she takes advantage of his still developing mind, which has just begun to think about sex, sexuality, and what he wants out of a romantic relationship. Denji had just experienced his first sexual encounter with power in the bathroom and is questioning why it was dissatisfying despite it being a goal he set for himself and achieved through hardship. Makima immediately takes this vulnerability to force herself onto him to perfectly control him. She replaces his goal with a new goal. Now, instead of touching breasts, she's forced this idea into his mind that his goal should be sex, and not just sex, but specifically sex with her. She makes sure that Denji's heart only belongs to her, and any deviation from that will be met with great prejudice. Makima knows that a lovesick, horny teenager will do anything as long as he thinks he's getting some by the end of it. Bubblegum's manipulation of Finn is certainly more family friendly than how Makima manipulates Denji. PB knows what drives Finn. The young boy wants to be a hero, kill monsters, save people, and kiss the princess, i.e. her. Bubblegum knows that these desires will drive Finn to go to great lengths to accomplish his goals. She then uses this knowledge to manipulate him into doing anything she wants. Finn's strong desire to become a hero is egged on by Princess Bubblegum constantly playing the role of the damsel needing a charming hero to help her. She asks this 12-year-old to go on life-threatening missions to retrieve simple items for her or help her with an experiment she knows will endanger him. All she needs to do is call him her hero and give him quick kisses on the cheek to fan the flames of his crush on her, and Finn is completely under her control. Bonnibel essentially conditions the young boy to do whatever she commands of him through consistent little rewards that reaffirms his desire to be a hero and feeds into his crush on her. Going back to that amazing fan art by Ian Jones Cordy, this is a perfect representation of the similarities between both stories. Both Chainsaw Man and Adventure Time are stories where a young growing boy who is just learning about life and love has that era of exploration in their life monopolized by an adult woman who only wants to control and use them for their own means. If you've watched or read Chainsaw Man, you know that Makima isn't the only adult woman that takes advantage of Denji. Himeno is an older superior of Denji that forces herself onto him against his consent multiple times during a time where he was already sexually confused and vulnerable. I want to remind you all that not only is Denji only 16 years old, he's just discovered what he wants sexually through his experience with power and Makima and is completely unsure if he even wants to have sex with Himeno or not. I also want to remind everybody that Denji is Himeno's subordinate, and this creates a power imbalance that affects Denji's ability to consent enthusiastically. Throughout the scene of their sexual encounter, Denji does say that he wants to have sex with her, but you can't look at that face and say that it's enthusiastic consent. So why am I spending so much time talking about this moment with Himeno when I'm discussing the parallels between Denji and Finn? Well, remember that time that Lumpy Space Princess took advantage of Finn? The scene plays out almost exactly like Himeno's encounter with Denji. They engage in a kiss, which he was expecting, although Finn luckily made it out with a lot less bile in his mouth. Then, much like Himeno, Lumpy Space Princess was seeking out something much more than Finn was comfortable with at the time. She refused to take no for an answer, and the scene cuts before they had to change the rating. The next thing we see is LSP passed out and Finn awake, contemplating his experience and pondering what the hell just happened. And yes, this is almost exactly how it played out in Chainsaw Man with Denji and Himeno. The major difference here is that while Himeno's attempt to force herself on Denji doesn't get any further than some light groping and undressing, Lumpy Space Princess fully hooked up with Finn. You don't need to look any further than the evidence of the flower petal falling off, indicating that Finn has just been deflowered by the purple princess. I'm not saying that Himeno is a one-to-one character comparison to LSP, but it is interesting that both Finn and Denji experienced a very similar situation in which they were pressured into a sexual encounter that they couldn't consent to enthusiastically. It emphasizes the similarities between these two young men when it comes to their relationships with women. I am sure that there are loads of more examples in which Denji and Finn share similarities. Please feel free to let me know in the comments below if I've missed anything. Chainsaw Man is my favorite manga and anime of all time, in case that wasn't clear from my previous videos. But I haven't seen Adventure Time in years, so it was a nice little nostalgia trip to revisit it with a more adult lens. Thank you all for the ongoing support. For those of you who really like my content and want to support me even further, I want to put out there that I just created a Patreon. It is completely optional, but any support there would be tremendously appreciated. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time with more lukewarm takes.